More than 80% of the federal government's roughly 2 million civil servants work outside the Washington, D.C. area, including every U.S. state and territory and countries around the world, doing the day-to-day work involved in delivering on the mission of government. However, making sure they have up-to-date and secure high-speed network and wireless communications capabilities in many of the field locations where they work can be a challenge. Many branch offices don't have the IT support staff that larger offices have, but they have citizen and workforce expectations for quality of service and overall digital experience that where they expect the best of what they see around the world. So that's where evaluating a network as a service approach to federal field and branch offices can really make a big difference. I'm Wyatt Cash with Scoop News Group, and joining us to share their perspective on the benefits of having experienced providers manage the network services needed by government field offices are Adam Nemethy, Deputy Director NWAVE in the Office of the CIO at the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration within the Department of Commerce. Also joining us is Scott Andersen, Distinguished Solution Architect for Verizon, and Justin Fields, Leader Cross Architecture Solutions at Cisco. Gentlemen, welcome. Thank you for joining us. And Adam, I'd like to start with you. First of all, would you just give us a brief sense for NOAA's field office operations? And what are the key challenges that government branch offices typically face in ensuring that their employees have the IT, network, and communication systems to support their and their agency's missions?
Sure, and thank you, Wyatt. I appreciate the opportunity to be here today. The interesting part is you hit a lot of it right on the head. It's really the lack of access maybe to the same resources. So we have some sites that are your typical 18-story buildings, have traditional networks up to 80, 90 switches, full wireless capabilities and different things. Then we have some that are meteorologists that are responding to incidents that we call incident meteorologists that are out at fires. We have people that are on ships. We have the weather forecast office. And so spread across all these, sometimes you have a single person that's in these offices and they're doing all the functions. They're not IT people. And so they're developing solutions to things with their limited knowledge, but they don't gain kind of the entire knowledge that is in the organization. So we see that as kind of a hindrance at the smaller sites that they have a lot more reliance upon themselves when we have experts in other areas that could help them.
And then just to follow on that, talk to me a little bit about how you see network services impacting the level of services that your employees and your constituents experience, and how would you describe kind of their overall satisfaction in working with their agency?
Sure. I think user-facing services are really difficult because when a user can't get to what they're trying to get to, all they know is it's a network problem. It doesn't matter if it's a computer problem. It doesn't matter if it's a resource on the other end problem. We actually provide network as a service inside of NOAA and the Department of Commerce, as well as a little wider than that. And the number one kind of thing we see there is they get access to the full team of engineers is what they're really looking for. They have a hard time even articulating their needs. And so getting to them directly, talking to them and saying, just tell me what you do on a daily basis. Let me sit there and see what you do. And then I can help you solve how to better access things really helps them. So I think almost all of it boils down to access to network professionals that can really solve their needs.
Thank you. Let me bring in Scott Andersen here at this point to kind of widen the conversation. And Scott, I'd like to ask you, what does network as a service look like in today's wired and increasingly wireless world with respect to federal field offices?
The concepts within what is NaaS, we like to focus starting out on what is the size of the remote location. Because that's really critical. First of all, that helps us determine, can we live as a wireless only location? It's funny if you think about it. If I said to you, well, I'm going to make some of your sites wireless only as recently as 10 years ago, after the pitchforks were sharpened, they'd be chasing me, right? It would not be a pleasant conversation. But now it becomes a very much more viable conversation, as well as looking at broadband and other alternative resources that we can leverage. And the beauty of it is all of it comes to one place, the one router that we can put into that remote location. And that one router can have a wireless connection. It can have a traditional wired connection. It can have a broadband, a wired connection. We can begin to look at within network as a service some of the components of SD-WAN, some of the components of a more robust network that ultimately will drive that. But the very first thing, know what type of site we're talking about. Is it a small site? Is it an extra small site? Or the ones that always get us in the federal government, and I'm sure NOAA has quite a few of these, critical sites, ones that can never be down. And the ones that can never be down, those are the ones you really have to take a much different approach. So great question. Thank you.
And then Justin Fields, shifting the conversation just a little, can you talk a little bit about some of the key benefits of, and really maybe even the business and economic benefits for contracting the management of your network and wireless services at a branch office, versus the government owning it or that branch owning it and trying to keep up with maintaining those systems internally?
Yeah, great question, White. And thanks again for having me. I think some of the bigger economic benefits of running network as a service, it's the conversation of OpEx versus CapEx. With capital expenditures, if you will, you have unpredictability within that environment. I think to Scott's point, Adam's point, if something were to go down, that's a cost that maybe wasn't expected versus the operational expense or OpEx. With OpEx, it's consistent. And I think overarching with everything, you have consistency in operations, you have consistency in your cost per year, whether that's per device or per location or anything along there, it's consistent. When I look at the cost of the actual asset itself within network as a service versus the individuals that it takes to run the infrastructure, consistency is key. So not only can I have a consistent operating expense OpEx throughout the entire contract, I also get consistent visibility. If outages were to happen, I don't have to worry about overtime or anything along those lines from a resource perspective. Patching, maintenance, all those costs that it takes to run an infrastructure are all included in that network as a service model, right? If you choose correctly.
So Adam, I'm curious, you're living with these kinds of branch office network decisions. Can you talk about what goes into your calculations when deciding whether to maintain your network and a wireless service internally, or whether it actually makes more sense to kind of go externally with a network as a service model?
Sure. And a lot of the stuff that was just said is very interesting. So the OpEx versus CapEx is a huge determination there. And when you have network as a service, that's a line item of the bill that you have to pay out. But when you're running your own network, that's the first thing on the chopping block when it comes up to spend. Oh, we can cut this, we can run end-of-life equipment, the network won't go down. But if you have to pay for a service, you have to pay that. So what it does is it moves the IT budget from the back of the line to a must purchase. So it really improves the architecture overall because there's no longer a question of, are we going to fund this? We have to fund this. Because we're buying a service. A lot of the calculation that goes into us is how unique the sites are. So to do anything as a service and run it and scale it, you have to have left and right lateral limits. So we do, you can't offer a lot of individuality. And we normally find that people's networks are not as unique as they think that they are, or the solutions don't have to be as unique as they think they do. And so we can really help a lot of people. But if people are really doing some very unique stuff, sometimes it is better for them to have their own control. So we just try to be open and honest about the support models and how that works. And I would just add really quickly that a lot of times people see the cost solely in the network, but remember you have the property aspect of management, you have the contracting for maintenance renewals, you have the logistics to get the stuff there, you have all these other elements. So we try to also inform people that your cost savings is not only directly in your IT department, it's also in a lot of these other supporting things. And we have to do yearly security inspections that we provide that for the customers that we serve, and then they don't have to do that. So that's another cost savings avenue for them by going as network as a service.
Those are some great points. Appreciate that. Scott and Justin, I'm going to field this to both of you, starting with you, Scott. What are other factors that agencies should consider about network services, such as security, network segmentation, or whether a branch office is is in like a multi-tenant office in a city versus in a freestanding location in a rural region? What would you have them consider?
Well, obviously security is critical, and how and where you apply the security becomes a big question, right? You can over secure your network, right? You can strangle the traffic on your network with security if you so choose. Not necessarily the optimal way to do it, but you could do it. And so as you look down the path of the new security technologies such as SASE or zero trust, things like that, you have a lot of options that you can consider. The intent being, let's get to a point where anybody connecting to our network has the right amount of privilege for what they need to do. Now, when you start talking about shared facilities, that really becomes a very interesting question. First of all, if it's like some of the many federal facilities that have multiple agencies in a single building, it's conceivable that it actually can be cost effective to evaluate how you come to Verizon and say, hey, you're already connected in the building, right? Because there's the reality of connecting a new building costs a certain amount of money. It's not always an easy experience, and it's not always a fast experience. But the reality of that is, if we're already there, it becomes a lot easier. The other thing, obviously, then when we look at multiple entities in a single building, in the long run, is what is the capacity that they need? Because if you've got a 10 gig pipe for one agency, and the total combined bandwidth of all the agencies in that building really will fit in that 10 gig pipe, at that point begin to look at how can you use the separation within the routing structures to actually use that one 10 gig pipe, not bring in 10 1 gig pipes, which ultimately 10 1 gig pipes will cost more than one 10 gig pipe because of the nature of networks, and also you have a lot more equipment with 10 than you would with one. So there's things like that we can do, and things like that we can consider. And it becomes, it just becomes really critical. I can remember deploying Office 365 with a government customer. And one of the problems that they experienced, this was pre-COVID, pre-pandemic, it would have been worse in the pandemic era, but the VPN infrastructure that they were using put so much header room on the traffic that people remotely couldn't do video conference calls. I know there's a huge push right now in the world, right? Everybody on video or everybody not on video. But you can always tell what kind of call it is by whether or not you come on, right? Everybody's off video. It's a multitasking call. Everybody's on video. They're expecting you to focus. But when you force people to be on video and they can't because of bandwidth, you really start to cause other problems within the entity for how people operate. So.
And Justin, what would you add?
Yeah, and I'll add on to what Scott mentioned. Obviously, I think security is of the utmost importance, but I think above that, I don't think there are two locations, if you will, that are alike. And I think, Scott, to your earlier point, we need to understand the use case of the facility itself. Is it multi-tenant? Is it a single tenant? Do we have employees accessing the infrastructure versus customers? And I think that really does point to a couple of things to add on. Number one is identity, right? Who is it that is connecting to the infrastructure, and what should they have access to? When I visit a government agency, I want to connect to the Wi-Fi, but I don't want that Wi-Fi to give me access across the entire infrastructure where I should be able to see things that I don't need to see. So identity is critical. And I think above and beyond anything, I think agencies should consider the customer experience, right? Do we have adequate bandwidth? I know that security, tends to slow things down. However, right, we ultimately want security. We want a balance of everything within that infrastructure. But when we focus on that customer experience, that's key. All right, Scott, you mentioned the video conference, two individuals, right? If there's not enough bandwidth, that's all about the experience. I want a positive experience. I want the best of security. I want to understand who's managing the environment, et cetera, but a lot of things that we have to consider nonetheless, but those would be two that I would add in addition.
I appreciate that. And then Adam, kind of a different question. So In many cases, federal employees spend most of their time in the field and not in the branch office. So, talk to me a little bit about how does that shape your decisions when it comes to maintaining your network and wireless services now, and how do you see that in the future?
Sure. Just like Scott brought up an interesting point about SASE and zero trust, and my ultimate goal is to commoditize anything that can be commoditized. So networking should ultimately be commoditized, right? It's just a transport mechanism to get you. You can apply the security in different ways to accomplish what you want. And the user experience is very important. So what we found is in COVID, everyone is working from home. They come back into the office. They're used to working from home. So we used to have the other flip where I can reach everything in the office. I can't reach it from home because the permission sets are different and they got to change that. But what we really want is the same experience, and help desk can respond better to that. So the wireless only office was brought up. We have an approach in some of our sites where we offer guest only wireless access that you still need to use VPN to get to your resources. But what it benefits you may think, oh, that's a bad customer experience. But the customer is happy because it's the exact same process no matter where they are to get to their stuff. And that ultimately is what matters. And so a lot of, VPN is a technology, SASE is a technology, SD-WAN is a technology that we employ. So the key for us is no matter how the user is connecting or where they're connecting from, we want them to have the same experience. So let's choose technologies that will provide that. And it helps the entire stream from the user to the service desk, managing their requirements, to the people setting permissions because they're doing it one way and they don't have to think about all these different things. So really it's kind of holistic approach of how do I make it to where no matter where this user connects or how they connect, they get the same experience.
Terrific. And then lastly, kind of speaking of planning for the future, Scott and Justin, you guys are on the front lines regarding network and wireless technologies and how they're advancing. Can you talk about just very briefly what you see on the horizon that agencies should be aware of as they plan their future needs, things like future G and so forth? What are you seeing that agencies should be aware of as they plan not only for their employees but also their constituents? Scott, I'll start with you.
Awesome. Well, obviously 6G is out there. It is bandied about. It is not a standard today, but it is something that will be available. If you look at the increase, right, if we go back to 1G and then 2G, everybody wants to forget 1G and 2G. Those were that's the first digital cellular signal, right, which everybody forgets what CDMA was like when you're driving along the highway and all of a sudden you don't have service. And you don't have service for 25, 30, 40, 50, 60, 70 miles of traffic, and then all of a sudden you're back. Or you get that, the failure to properly transfer between cells, all right? So, 3G adds the concept of data and call at the same time. 4G obviously improves the data radically. 5G, I mean, if you're sitting in an ultra wideband area, we've run tests in New Jersey. We've gotten up to 5.5 gig in terms of download speeds, which, I mean, that's considering the value proposition of a wireless circuit, that is a pretty amazing thing. So, right, that's one thing that's coming. The other thing, and you're seeing it from pretty much all of the telcos out there, I'll be a fair and equitable player in the space. Everybody's doing it, and that's the integration of satellite services. That way you have no places where you aren't able to communicate. Now you can get that natively with an iPhone today. If you're out anywhere, regardless of what carrier you're on, your iPhone can switch to satellite mode in emergency, which means, if you think about the power of what the iPhone or the Samsung phones can do, in particular, in this case, the iPhone, if you fall, your watch is going to notify your phone that you fell. If your phone cannot connect into an SOS, you're going to be able to bounce off the satellite automatically. You don't have to think about it. You don't have to worry about it. And we're moving towards that for communication throughout the infrastructure. The concept of having the lawyers do not like the word ubiquitous, so I'm going to say always available connectivity. That'll be the future.
And Justin?
Yeah, I agree. Like the faster speed, I think that's one thing, right? So redundant connectivity, I think, is phenomenal. I think two other things that are on the horizons for agencies to consider are that what they're going to see. Integrated security, I think, is number one. Again, so we talk end-to-end security, regardless of where you are, home office, anywhere in between. Security is going to become more integrated and already has to some degree within the network. So those two worlds are going to come together to create that seamless experience. The other thing that I would add, Wyatt, is better visibility. And I think the visibility across an infrastructure is key. Whether you own the infrastructure, whether it's managed infrastructure, visibility is key, right? So downtime costs money. We need better visibility across the infrastructure, whether you're connecting to the home office, to the cloud, all those things, we need to see things better. And that's something that when we talked earlier about some of the requirements, of what organizations should consider, visibility should be of the utmost importance, right? Speed is always important, right? Scott, to your point. But again, integrated security, better visibility.
If I could just tag on one thing there. In the technology space, the interesting thing is a lot of people follow news and different things. They see different technologies. And what we get is people say, hey, I want to put a Starlink here. I want to use private 5G, or I want to use X. And if you're in Alaska, the solution that you would propose is far different than if you're in Sunnyvale, California. Somebody in Sunnyvale tells me they want to put a Starlink dish up. I'm like, that doesn't make any sense. You can have fiber and cellular and all these other better connectivity models for there. But if you're in Alaska or somewhere else, it could make a lot more sense. So I think one of the important things of network as a service is, I always say, is that if you can't explain your requirements in plain language, you probably don't actually understand them well enough. Explain them in plain language. Let technologists solve those for you with the best tools available inside of the budget that you have, and you're a lot better off. And so I just wanted to add that. Thank you.
No, thank you. That's a great point to end on, actually, and appreciate all of your perspectives on the evolving state of networking and communications. So Adam Nemethy and Scott Andersen and Justin Fields, thank you so much for joining us. Really appreciate your insights and perspectives, and just kind of putting a better sense around supporting field and branch offices in the government to better support not only the workforce, but constituents. So thank you all for joining us.
Thank you.
Thank you.